Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Patrick Donohoe here, news editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. This week we're looking at weather conditions in the west of the country, where heavy rain across the region has been causing difficulty for farmers with livestock. Our dairy editor, Jack Kennedy, has more details about the situation, and he gives some tips on the management of cattle through the wet patch to digital editor Thomas Hubert.
Especially in the west of the country and the northwest, essentially they've got double or treble the volume of rain that the farmers in the south and east of the country have got. So this is putting pressure on some farms, either that they can't get out grazing or that they have silage that needs to be harvested. So it's putting a lot of farmers over in the west and northwest in a kind of a serious enough position.
So you've mentioned two problems there. Let's start with grazing. What to do if your fields are beginning to get waterlogged or your cattle aren't comfortable outside?
Yeah, I mean, essentially any damage on grazing ground, poaching or cattle creating puddles in field, I mean, it's not acceptable, and farmers essentially should be trying to take those stock off the fields and housing them short term if it has to be, depending on the length of the wet spell, that how long it continues. So I mean, that's probably one of the first things. If there is poaching going on, it shouldn't be going on, and cattle should be housed or taken off the fields. And I suppose the other big one then in terms of grazing is that if they have strip wires, that they should just allocate enough grass for the one day or for a half a day, so that the damage is limited to a small area of the field. I mean, they're the big two things that farmers have control over. Take the stock off, and if they have or have no opportunity to put them in, well then they need to be strip grazing or kind of fencing them into a much smaller area rather than let them run over the whole field.
And the economics of it, are there, a farmer might be reluctant to feed in August and maybe want to keep cattle out as long as possible, but you're saying it's worth bringing them in if conditions are too bad.
Oh, absolutely, because I mean, any damage that's done to fields now, I mean, essentially that field will grow very little grass for the rest of the year. So I mean, you're reducing the growth potential of your farm by doing that damage. And then of course you have the drop in performance if cows or milking cows or heavy finishing cattle are out in bad conditions. They're poor performing, and it's a double whammy. You're reducing the potential for grass to grow, and you're losing performance. So get them in, keep the performance up, and hopefully look at it will only be a short-term setback, and cattle and cows can get back out in the short term.
The other thing, of course, is silage. A lot of people looking at a second cut or maybe third cut at some point. What can they do in these conditions? Yeah,
I mean, it is very difficult, and you're really dependent on the weather, but it's a case of having to watch the weather forecast very closely. And if there is a dry day or two, especially for crops that are maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks overdue from their cutting date, well, then you really have to go and take it. And if that means switching from pit silage to round bale silage so that you can get at it a little bit earlier, well, then it might be worth it. Yes, of course, again, like the last situation, it might be a higher cost in the short term, but at least it will get the field back growing grass, and at least the quality of the silage that you are preserving will be a little bit better than if you leave it for another week or 2 weeks and this continues, and all of a sudden then you're into a case into middle of September, and you get very little growth subsequently on that field. So at the earliest opportunity, get the crop off and get it back growing green grass.
It's not all doom and gloom. I think grass is still growing. We're not to a stage, despite the pretty low temperatures, to a stage where grass is back. That's not the issue, right?
No, I mean, the big issue is the rainfall levels, I suppose, especially in the west and northwest, where they've had upwards of 3 inches or 60 millimetres of rain in the last number of weeks, in the last 2 weeks. And again, this week is particularly, we've had very heavy rain in most parts Tuesday and Wednesday. So, look, it's a rainfall issue. Grass growth rates are not significantly reduced. While they are reduced, as you say, due to the lower temperatures, it's not the problem. The problem is the rainfall and grazing conditions at the moment.
All right, Jack, thank you very much. There are more details in this week's Farmers Journal, including more tips on how to manage stock, lighter and heavier stock in these conditions, in this week's paper and at farmersjournal.ie.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Meanwhile, there's been a major shake-up at the head of FBD Insurance in the past few days. Its chief executive, Andrew Langford, resigned last Friday after 7 years in the job. The Irish Farmers Journal agri-business editor Eoin Lowry explains what is happening at the insurance company founded by farmers in the 1960s.
I suppose on Friday last there was an announcement made by FBD to the stock exchange that the CEO, Andrew Langford, was stepping down from the top position at the insurer. We had been running a series of articles on the insurance market, which we ran last week, and we were following up this week with another article focusing particularly on the problems that FBD have had in the past 12 months, 18 months. With the news that came on Friday, we decided to look a little bit deeper into those issues.
What kind of problems are you talking about there? What is the recent history at FBD prior to this announcement?
Well, I think first of all, before we look at FBD, I think we need to look at the overall market. The market is extremely competitive out there. There are 7 main players in the Irish market in the insurance sector. FBD happens to be now the largest insurer in Ireland with about 14% market share. And it's just been an extremely competitive and tight space to be operating in at the moment. The market, I suppose, has shrunk by about 40%, so it's halved since 2002 over the last 12 years. And that comes on the back of a reduced size economy where there's less business, less traffic compared to where it was in 2002. And everybody in the market is losing money. It was an extremely difficult year in 2014, and FBD wasn't helped, I suppose, by the storm that happened in February, which was Storm Darwin, everyone will remember, where it cost the industry about 160 million euros. And that was one of the reasons, I suppose, that FBD didn't perform at all last year, where if we look back at the figures, they had projected back at the start of 2014 to make profits in around 45 million euros. And by the end of the year, they lost actually 4.5 million. So it was a huge loss over the space of 12 months. And that surprised a lot. And we saw then the share price collapse effectively over the year from, we've seen in the past 12 months alone, it's dropped by about 45%.
So now FBD has lost its chief executive. Where can the company go? And maybe for our listeners, many of whom have FBD policies, is it a reliable insurer going forward? Is the company solid to keep going?
FBD, I suppose, was set up to insure farmers, and it was set up in the 1970s, and it has remained strong to that core where it insures about 80% of the agricultural market, and the agri segment of its business accounts for about 50% of its business. So it is still strongly focused on agri, and it wants to be. While the storms did cause issues, there are a number of other challenges for the business in that it went along a strategy to increase its motor book, and unfortunately, because of the market and the claims market that's out there at the moment in the wider industry, similar to other insurance, they all have this problem. That book is coming back to a little bit bite them at the moment because of the increased claims. So it does have a future, albeit that will have to come when the new CEO, whoever that will be, will come into being in the next few months. FBD have results, interim results coming out on the 25th of August, so it'll be interesting to see how 2015 has performed to date. But what appears to be happening is that these results do not look that promising at the moment.
So, Eoin, you're still seeing an indigenous insurer dominating the Irish market, as FBD is doing at the moment. You think they do have a future here in this country?
I think they do. I think their future will look a little bit different than what they have been doing in recent history. They have been around for 40 years, and I think we have to remember that. And it has been an extremely profitable and good insurer for farmers down through that time. And I think we have to remember that while they are going through difficulty at the moment, I think if they can get over this and move into a more stabilised phase, I think we can see them move into a profitable growth business into the future.
Thank you, Eoin, and a lot of coverage to read in the past few days at farmersjournal.ie, and in this week's Farmers Journal, the agribusiness pages will be full of FBD coverage again.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Now, looking towards the near future, it's clear that efforts to combat climate change will have a major impact on the legislation affecting farmers in the coming years. The Institute of International and European Affairs, as well as Glanbia, held the last of a series of conferences on the issue last Thursday. I asked Joseph Curtin from the IIEA about the results of a survey they carried out across the agriculture sector about opinions on upcoming climate change challenges.
Well, what we're trying to do is to look at how Ireland can respond jointly to the policy objectives of expanding agricultural output and yet meeting our climate change objectives. And, there's clearly a huge opportunity here for Ireland to expand its food output, but there's also a really difficult challenge to meet, which is meeting our climate change objectives. And our survey was really asking people, how can we do this? And we think that climate-smart agriculture is a useful way of looking at the problem. And climate-smart agriculture is about taking an integrated approach to those two objectives. And really what our survey was about was asking international and national experts, how should Ireland respond? Is climate-smart agriculture something that could be interesting? And so we did an online survey, and today was about presenting those results.
And how easily do the two sit together? Agriculture, expanding agriculture in a time where quotas in dairy is gone. Yeah. There's some beef production expanding as well, but and then also mitigating that against very real threats in climate, which some farmers maybe aren't fully up to speed on yet.
Yeah, and I think that's the key issue. How well do they sit together? And I suppose there's a traditional perception that these two things are at loggerheads. And what we're trying to say today is that there are actually opportunities here, and there's opportunities from leadership. And we heard today from some of the fruit processors that when they go to their suppliers are saying to them, how sustainable is your output? Can you prove that it's sustainable? Can you prove that it's carbon efficient? And we think that this is something that's going to become more and more important. And therefore we think that Ireland needs to establish itself as the leader. And, like building on Origin Green, that we need to establish a leadership position in this area because we've got the biggest challenge, to be quite frank. We've got the biggest challenge because the biggest proportion of our emissions come from agriculture. So therefore we sort of have to be the leader here, and we have to show other countries how it's done. And we've seen in other areas, small countries can take a kind of a leadership position on specific issues in areas where they have strengths. And Ireland certainly has strengths in this area. We have an external sustainable herd, we have very fertile land, we have some of the leading agri-food companies in the world, and we have a very supportive policy environment. And we have some very progressive farmers out there who acknowledge, that there's a big challenge here, but also an opportunity. And I think what we're trying to do here is to bring people together, to get together the greatest minds, and to set out for government what we think a leadership position looks like.
How important is it from Ireland? Because some reports, there's conflicting reports on how it is that if Ireland doesn't do anything at all, yes, there'll be some climate shocks here and there. But overall, it's the Mediterranean countries in Europe that are really going to feel this. What is the outcome if Ireland really just sits in its hands?
Well, there's two ways of looking at that. I mean, first of all, a lot of the climate science is uncertain what the impacts will be for Ireland, but we know from the fodder crisis and that kind of thing that there can be negative impacts for Ireland. But really what we're looking at as a small country is, it is true to say that whatever we do is not going to have a massive impact on climate change. But what's important is that a small, wealthy country like Ireland plays a leadership role or plays some sort of role in meeting this challenge. And the problem Ireland faces is that we've got these really difficult EU targets. And so Food-wise 2025, it didn't yet take the step of trying to cost that in terms of climate change. But we've done a few back-of-the-envelope calculations ourselves, and I wouldn't like to quote numbers at this point, but, we're talking hundreds of millions in carbon credits. So it's about avoiding that kind of an impact as well. We have to manage not just climate change's impacts, but also we have to manage the risks that could be faced by the taxpayer if we just continue to expand output with no kind of cognizance of what the impact will be on greenhouse gas emissions. So it's not just climate impacts we're worried about, it's kind of regulatory impacts, if you like. What is policy going to make us do, and how should we respond to that?
And finally, rollout and bring it to a practical level. Twofold. First of all, at policy level and government, yes. How do we do that? And secondly, for farmers, the people who are, I suppose, to use the cliche, at the coalface of this, how do we make it, incentivise them, for want of a better expression?
So in the first case, I think, really what we need to do is take a more integrated approach to this. We need to manage risk through our strategy, so through our Food-wise 2025. Those kind of strategies need to look more, I think, at what are the climate risks out there, the regulatory risks, the economic risks, and we need to integrate climate change policy into our agricultural policy making in a more kind of balanced way. I think that's a really important policy objective. But in terms of rolling it out for farmers, I think, farmers need to be, I think there's a problem with this debate and I think sometimes farmers feel this, that people are pointing the finger at them, but it can't be about that. This is a societal thing. We consume what farmers produce, and so we really need to look at this in a much more integrated way, and how can we incentivise farmers? How do we provide incentives? because from talking to the farmer communities, from talking to Harold Kingston in the IFA and people like that, they're saying, look, we'll do what you ask us once there's an incentive there, and I think that's a perfectly legitimate kind of starting point for farmers. Incentivise us to do the right thing and we'll do it. And so therefore, government needs to think about what kind of incentives are going to work. And, clearly it's not only economic incentives. Sometimes it's social incentives, working together with people in the community who are doing similar things. It's like Teagasc extension services, know-how. It's about integrating innovation and R&D onto farms. So there's a whole... Sorry, I haven't given you a very precise kind of answer. And, really we haven't bottomed out that sort of part of it yet. We're at the high level at the moment, and we need to think more about what our actual messages are going to be.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Finally, let's turn to Irish Country Living consumer editor Ciara Leahy and journalist Roisin Healy for an insider advice on the best stalls to visit at the Dublin Horse Show from a shopping perspective.
This is something that we like to do around the shows, is kind of, look and see what are stalls that are really worth stopping at. And this year there are a good few at the horse show. I mean, the horse show is really popular for shopping, but there's one that I think is going to get a lot of attraction, and that's a stall called Bua Saddles, especially obviously for all the horse lovers that are going to be there. It's an idea that Martin Ryan, an entrepreneur, he came up with the idea about 10 years ago, and it's 10 years in the making. Now, everybody knows that a saddle is, one piece of equipment, whereas he has developed a saddle that's kind of nearly two planes. It's cantilevered. So the comfort of the horse on the bottom end of the saddle is paramount. And then on the top, it's the comfort of the rider and the conformity of the rider. So he's going to be launching at the RDS. The Bua saddles are going to cost €2,000, but he's going to have a very good launch price. And basically, he's going to have them there at the stand, and then they're made to measure just for you.
Amazing. And will there be any other hot launches taking place?
Yeah, another launch that caught our eye is Ballyboy Design. This is a new fashion range by a Langford girl called Siobhan Quinn. So she's launching her new business at the horse show as well, and her designs draw together Irish tweed, silk, silver, felt and leather. She creates the most beautiful and luxurious collections of limited edition capes. I mean, we have some big pictures on Irish Country Living this week, and they look absolutely fantastic. So I think that they're going to get a lot of attraction at the horse show as well.
Definitely, Ciara. Fashion's always such a big pull at the stalls. And what other fashion stalls caught your eye?
There was another fashion stall. It's called Georgia in Dublin, and it's the mother and daughter team, Nicola and Georgia Scott. And both are really into the outdoors and love being outdoors and involved in equestrian. But they were really getting a bit annoyed by the lack of, nice fashionable clothing. So they kind of put together a range that is really comfortable, and it's really, it's great for being in and out of the saddle, but really fashionable as well. They've some really nice coats and just really functional but comfortable modern fabrics. And I think that they are going to be quite popular as well, just because, I suppose it's one thing mucking out in stables, but when you're going to events, which a lot of people are going to horse events at the weekends, you want to still look nice or whatever. So I think that they're definitely ticking the right boxes. And another fashion stall I think that is always popular is McGee. Really has a great range both for men and women, but other design is really unique. It's based on the sea and landscape around Donegal, and they use Irish tweed, and they really have really great outdoor wear. And they're going to have their autumn range, their autumn and winter range, but they're also going to have their summer collection, which obviously summer is nearly over now, and there's going to be 50% off some of those items. So I think that's going to really attract a lot of people who might be thinking ahead for next year, or we hopefully might have a few more weeks of summer left that they could use their purchases. And one other one that I think is really going to get some people's attention, Roisin, is Shevlin Millinery. Look, hats are always big at the horse show, whether they're women or men. Hats are always enjoyed. So the Shevlin Panama is one that's really popular at the moment. Even the president has one, and a few celebs like Tom Vaughan Lawler from Love Hate, he's going around scouting them. You'll get the full range in Brown Thomas and Arnott's, but you're really sure to pick up a good deal at the horse show. So I think that's also going to be a popular stand.
Amazing. And then are there any quirky stalls that people should stop at?
Yeah, there's one that I really love. It's called Shoot My Dog, and it's a good play on words, but it's an award-winning pet photographer, Brenton Burke. And basically what he does is he goes into your house and he puts your pet and yourself at ease and gets some great shots of, you know, you and your dog, or it could be you and your horse, or even you and your cat. It's a really good idea. And his package, which includes, you know, the photo shoot and pictures and keyrings and, you know, and a digital copy, usually comes in 175, but he's doing a deal at the horse show, only at the horse show, which is €75. So I mean, that's even just a great present you could get someone if you're thinking ahead of for Christmas or something. You know, it's a really nice idea for a present to give someone. And another really different stall, but absolutely fantastic, is Rocking Horse Ireland. Now this is the invention of Pat Broadley. He's a wood carver that specialises in rocking horses, and they're absolutely amazing. They're really unique, made from native Irish hardwood, and he even copies real horses and makes them into rocking horses just for his customers. Now they are expensive. They're $3,500 starting price, but I mean they're made to last, not just for your lifetime but for generations to come. He even has a waiting list because he puts so much time into his rocking horses that he can only make 5 a year. So, you know, you might not get one straight away, but I mean, it's really worth visiting the store just to look at the creations. They're absolutely fantastic.
That's amazing. And then what's your pick for real horse lovers?
If you are looking for a gift for a real horse lover, or you love horses yourself, Claire Malloy, she does these horsehair ceramics. And when I first saw this, I was like, what are horsehair ceramics? But basically, she makes these ceramic pieces, and when it's taken out of the kiln, they're still hot, and she takes a piece of hair from the mane or the tail of the horse, and she places it into the piece, and the hair burns in, leaving these beautiful black lines. So each piece is really unique. So she has like gorgeous vases, tea light holders, ornaments, pendants, brooches, like so many. She's also doing her own homeware collection now as well. Tableware collection. So I think they're really unique pieces, and I suppose you can give vases or whatever as gifts to people, but if you're a horse lover, you know, it's something that extra bit special. So I think that's also really worth looking at. And in Irish Country Living this week, all the stand numbers are also on the page, so they'll be easy to find if you're particularly interested in any of them.
Perfect. Thanks, Ciara. So those are great tips, and be sure to have your copy of Country Living with you in your hands at the show.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Eoin Lowry, the home of Irish dairy.